as we're growing and learning and have goals, which is all a good thing, is to look at each day and say, you know what went well today?
This is the Biz Reveal, and I am your host, Craig Sawyer. This week's episode brought to you by Sawyer Health Solutions. Questions about your health insurance plan? Do you have the coverage that you need? Confused as to what is better for you at PPO, HMO, or EPO? Are your doctors in network? With access to all health coverage plans available in 31 states, Sawyer Health Solutions looks into all options that are available, including private plans that are not on the marketplace exchange, and you only pay for what you need. If you don't currently have health coverage because of the rising premiums and annual deductibles, or maybe you have a policy now, but you want to know if there are better options available that may cost you less, contact Sawyer Health Solutions for a free quote. You don't have to wait until November. There are new health insurance plans available all year long. Call Sawyer Health Solutions at 239-677-9877 or visit their website at sawyerhealthsolutions.com. Let Sawyer Health Solutions work with you to find the best plan for your specific situation. This week's guest, Shirene Gentry. Shirene lives in North Carolina and is a life coach, helping people tap into who they truly are, helping people find their true self. She has authored 4 books to date, all of which are available right now on Amazon. Her most recent, titled Identity Unveiled, Daughter of the King of Kings, explains how she discovered that the story of her adoption did not match the mountain of evidence set before her, which points to one conclusion: that she is an illegitimate daughter of the deposed Shah of Iran. Would she think of herself differently if she really was the daughter of the Shah of Iran? Her story is a journey into looking deeply into who she really is. Our conversation in this episode leads us to discuss stress and how it affects mental health, and we look at the different types of stress, methods in coping with stress, positive outlets, and perhaps most importantly, how people actually interpret their stress. You can contact Shirene directly at her website at ShireneGentry.com or email her at hopeunveiled@gmail.com. This is the Biz Reveal with this week's guest, Shirene Gentry. Stress and your mental health.
One thing that I can tell you is that for each person, stress can be different. Stress is individualistic. What stresses me out may not be what stresses you out. So there are different types of stress. The first kind of stress is actually called eustress, which is eustress. And this is actually the good kind of stress, if there is such thing. But a great example would be, let's just say, preparing for a wedding or preparing for moving into a new house. These are wonderful things, but even wonderful things can cause some stress in our lives. So that's an example of eustress. There's distress, which can happen when we have maybe an unexpected major life stressor hit us. We wake up in the day thinking our day is going to be a normal day. And then, something occurs during that day to really kind of turn our lives around. And that's distress. And then there's a third kind of stress, which is chronic stress. And so an example of this might be caregiving. Especially with our aging population, you've got spouses taking care of their loved ones who are sick. Even caregiving, people in my generation are now caregiving their elderly parents. And what does that look like? Well, if they're in the home, that is just a chronic, never let up daily stress. And so those are really the kinds of different kinds of stress that we're talking about. But again, realizing that people are unique and individualistic, because what stresses one person out may be okay for another. One other note that I would like to mention is Science does tell us that a certain amount of stress is actually good for us. So if you look at the bell curve, if we look at the left side of that curve, if we've got just enough stress, just enough anxiety, which is motivating, which propels us to get our goals done during the day, to mark off those things on our to-do list. That's actually, it's just enough to motivate us to accomplish some things.
Is that just the stress that you have, that it's not bad stress? It's not where it's bringing you down. It's maybe just that internal feeling like, to make sure I can avoid the bad stress. It's just that little stressor to kind of help push you along.
Right. And mainly it's just the things that we have on our daily to-do lists. So a little bit of an example. I bit off too much that I could chew yesterday. I decided to get some yard work done. My husband had a new tool, so I thought I would go out there and experiment. Well, I bit off too much. And so what was at first motivating became overwhelming because I tried to do too much. So, it has to be a realistic kind of thing that can be realistic. If I had a manageable, smaller goal, it wouldn't have been overwhelming, but I tried to do too much. So, but a little bit of stress is actually advantageous because it helps us get things done.
It's a motivator.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right.
Now, I think that, the stress, especially the good stress, and I understand completely where you're coming from there. And I think I put a lot of that on myself. And as we've mentioned on previous conversations before the podcast, is, I do have high goals, and a lot of us do, especially business owners and entrepreneurs. We put a lot of load on ourselves, and probably a lot more than we need to. But especially when you're first starting a business, you're doing everything and you want it done your way because you're the one building it. So you take a lot more stress on than you need to. The stress could be a good stress and a motivator, but that probably just depends on how you deal with that stress, right?
Well, it also depends on a couple of things. Number one is I'm a life coach, so I help my clients with manageable, what we call SMART goals. And so it needs to be specific. It needs to be manageable. It needs to be realistic. And I think a lot of times it's great to have a large, lofty goal. And then look at, what does it mean for me today? What are some steps that I can take just today that will help me reach that larger goal? The problem is when we set our goals too lofty or too much, and then we don't know how to break it down into manageable, smaller goals, we get overwhelmed and we can either quit. Another important thing is and we did talk a little bit about this in a prior conversation, is what's the self-talk going on? And now self-talk is that internal dialogue that we never question. We just assume it to be true, but it's the dialogue that you have with yourself that no one else hears. All right. So what happens is when we get into trouble, especially if people tend to be lean more towards that perfectionistic end of the spectrum, their self-talk is getting them into trouble.
Right.
So, like the have-tos, the should-haves, so you have to kind of pay attention to that internal tape recorder that may actually set a person up for too hefty of a goal that ends up being overwhelming.
So how do you break down the goals? Because you mentioned that, everybody has those big goals, but like you did with the yard work, maybe you're taking on too much at one time and you need to break it up in smaller pieces. And I think that kind of works with goals, right? You have a big goal, but to get to that goal, it seems like it's unachievable. So you break it down to smaller pieces that are more achievable.
Exactly.
How do you do that? How do you do that with the stress? How do you break those things down into smaller pieces so it seems more manageable for you?
Well, I think a great way to look at it is, what do I do today? What reasonable, realistic steps do I do just today that will move me a little bit forward, but will eventually land that larger goal that I'm aiming for? It was interesting. So my husband came home last night and he took a look at what I had done yesterday in the yard. And he said, Shirene, if you had only focused on the bushes in the front, I was hedge clipping, then it wouldn't have been so overwhelming. And I felt like, okay, here's my husband who doesn't even study human behavior. He's life coaching me. But it's breaking it down so that you know that the end result will be where you want to end up, but you're not feeling overwhelmed with what just that day or that week brings.
Okay.
And I think this is true. This is another example, but just, think about people as they start the year with their health resolutions, right? They try to do too much too soon. If they haven't exercised at all, they set an unrealistic goal of going to the gym 5 days a week. Well, guess what? That's not going to happen. But for some, just using that as an example, if you break that down into, well, what's realistic? Okay, maybe 2 times a week. And then where people fail, whether it's, a business goal or a health goal, is at the end of the week, you need to reward yourself. Okay. Because that reward is what you're looking forward to, which then becomes a motivator to keep going the next week until that habit, until that new behavior has become a habit.
Celebrate those small steps. I am a firm believer in celebrating every little achievement. Absolutely.
Yes, celebrate the small steps, because the small steps get you someplace. But I do want to say the key to that is make sure you're choosing healthy behaviors and not negative ones.
Sure.
You don't want to sabotage yourself.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a good piece of advice, because I don't think we do that enough. Because I think that a lot of people feel that they haven't accomplished anything until they've achieve that big goal.
Right.
And achieving big goals, obviously that's a great thing, but it doesn't happen nearly as often as the small goals that you have to achieve to get to the big goal. And any reason to celebrate, I think, is a good reason. Right. I mean, any way that I can celebrate something is fantastic. And if you can celebrate those smaller moments that create the big final celebratory moment, I think that would certainly push you along.
Right. And what's crucial though, Craig, while we try to reach that goal, whatever it is, whether it's reducing stress in our lives, if it's trying something new, we've got to be very careful how we interpret even those disappointments along the way, because that can be paralyzing. And so our self-talk and how we interpret that event. Let me just give you an example. We're part of this podcasting community, and so we can look to see how many downloads we have, and I've done that. And so you've got to be careful, because in a split second, you can look and see how many downloads or, and so you've got to be careful to catch yourself. Well, let's say, for example, my podcast last week, I haven't looked, but let's say I have 1 download. Well, what am I doing with that 1 download? Am I telling myself, well, Shirene, no one wants to listen, so you might as well stop? Okay. Again, it's that internal dialogue
and it's
that
so
no one
easy
hears.
to do that. It's so easy to find that negative and that you didn't achieve it.
So you know what it does, the reason how you interpret and what your self-talk does for you, it either works for you or against you. So let's take that same example. It doesn't change, right? But let's say, for example, that I pull up my stats and I see, oh, I've had 1 download. Well, the healthier place, the healthier interpretation would be, wow, don't know why I had 1 download last week. Hey, I'll just keep going and see if next week looks better. So the event itself has not changed. And that, again, that's just a benign example.
How does somebody change that mindset, though? Because, and again, a prior conversation between you and I love this subject, and I want to make sure we stay on it for a minute, because myself, I am very hard on myself. And a lot of people are the same way as me, I think. At least I hope so. I can fit into that group. But, where it's so easy to be pessimistic, and it's so hard to be optimistic in some cases.
Yes.
How do you change? Because that's a personality trait, and it's difficult to change personalities, right? I mean, that's deeply ingrained in you. What are some ways that somebody like myself who, is so hard on ourselves, and even when there's a small achievement, I'm like, yeah, that's great that I did that, but I should have done this. I was capable of doing so much more. How do we change those mindsets?
Okay. So just listening to you just then, you said, I should have done more. All right. And that's one of those words that need to be a red flag. Should, really? Now, if I were life coaching you in a session, I would be curious to know, where did you being so hard on yourself, where do you think that started? Or how did that start? Or what kind of event in your backstory can you remember that this now became a pattern for you? So if I was coaching you, I'd be curious to take just enough look backward to see maybe where that started, how that started, because we can default to a certain pattern. For me, when I look at my patterns, and I'm not blaming my family, I'm just saying, based on all that was occurring in my childhood, I developed certain patterns.
Sure.
Well, left unchecked, once we're in adulthood, we either learn that these patterns work for us or they work against us.
Right.
Well, I discovered into adulthood that, my ways of coping with disappointment were not working well. Okay. And by that, I mean, one of my coping skills, because again, this was just something I learned early based on my introverted personality, that if I had a disappointment, I just learned very quickly from an early age to stuff my emotions. Well, you know what? That's what I thought worked for me until well into adulthood. And I realized that my prior ways of coping with life's disappointments or even life stressors was actually not a healthy way of coping at all. So sometimes we have to look back to kind of look and say, well, how did that pattern get started? Or were there other voices speaking into my life that I never questioned and assumed to be true? And so this is how I deal with life. So sometimes we have to take a little bit of a glance back to maybe know how that pattern started. But what's crucial is that once you start paying attention to your self-talk, and honestly, the best way to do that is kind of check your emotions. So if you're having a bad day emotionally, let's say you're beating yourself internally, but nobody knows that except you, right, then, a really helpful tool is to get a hard copy piece of paper and a pen and say, okay, here's my emotional state right now, which isn't that great. Why don't we back up that? I call it the thought train. Why don't we back up that train and be real specific about what kind of things I was thinking about that landed me in a negative emotional space?
So let me ask you this, because you are touching some nerves here. So, I do know where a lot of that comes from with me. And without getting too personal, just because of podcast sake, I do know where it starts, or at least a lot of it. Some of it's just my nature. I'm very personally driven. One of the issues that I have, though, is if I take away some of those stressors and if I take some of that pressure off myself, I feel like I'm not going to achieve as much. Like I use those stressors and that pressure that I put on myself as a way to push me. Like, I don't want to be stagnant. I don't want to be like, you know what? It's not that important to achieve this. And I think that's a great mindset because it does make life just flow and you can just go with it. But I'm very driven to keep achieving more. Like I'm never content. I'm never happy with where I'm at. I think it's great. Like I don't take it for granted, but I know what I'm capable of and I want to do more. So do you see what I'm saying? Like if I try to take some of those things away, I feel like maybe I'm not going to be all I can be.
Okay. So, all right. It's not, if I don't accomplish this, then I'm a this, right? So, there are two things. Number one, what does good enough look like?
I
And
don't
good
know.
enough.
I think that's part of the problem. I don't know. I don't know if there is a good enough.
Well, good enough doesn't necessarily mean, and usually doesn't mean, perfection. Because really, there's no such thing as perfection.
Right.
Right? We are always learning. We are always growing, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in so doing, we want to make sure that in our learning and our growing, we're not setting an unrealistic goal for ourselves for perfection, because we're never going to be perfect. It doesn't matter what field you're in, what you do, how long you've been doing it, whether you're brand new to it or you've been doing it for 3 decades. There's no such thing as perfection. I had a client a few years ago, and she was totally serious, but I think this talks to our point. In my first session with her, I went to her professional office, and she looked at me and she said, well, I want to be the perfect parent, and I want to be the perfect employer.
Oh, I would love that. I'd love how to be that perfect parent. You can make millions off of that book.
Well, the thing is, it's not going to happen.
Right.
Because none of us will ever achieve that.
And it's subjective too.
It is subjective. So, when it comes to, marriage, when it comes to parenting, what you say is to yourself is, hey, I'm going to do my best. And when I mess up, I've got 2 adult kids. I've had to go to them and say, hey, let's talk about your childhood. Let's talk about your upbringing. At the time, your dad and I thought we were doing the best we could. Hey, did we mess up? If we were to rewrite that clock or that calendar, would we do things differently? Sure. And you know what? It's okay. There's no such thing as perfection.
Right.
And so if in our mind's eye that we can say, hey, what does it mean to grow today? What does it mean to learn today? What does it mean to do my best just for today? And let perfection go out the window. I think we're going to be a little bit more content with where we land. And we realize that we're learning and we're growing, but a setback during the day because of how we interpret it doesn't mean we're a failure.
And it's not necessarily the pursuit of perfection. I don't claim to want to be perfect because, again, I realize that it's not even possible to get there. But success doesn't always necessarily mean perfection to me. It just means, just achievements, no matter how small, like you said, we celebrate those small achievements. I think it's just, there's always that next rung of the ladder, and yes, the ladder is never ending. I know it never ends. And so the goal is not to reach perfection. It's just to keep moving. And so the stressors that I create, I know there's some stressors that just happen to you,
sure,
as life. But sometimes you create stress. And I believe that I'm one of those people. This can't be healthy, but I do believe I'm one of those people who create certain stresses in my life just to keep pushing me along. So knowing that, I don't think that that's going to change about me. But what I would like to change, and I think a lot of people may agree, is not to have less stress, but to deal with that stress more effectively.
Sure.
And just getting in the right mindset to be able to deal with that, so it doesn't kill me.
Well, you know what? There are people, though, Craig, who do put too much stress on themselves.
Sure.
And so I call these the yes people, where it's really a boundary issue, where they really do have too much on their plate. And, even young parents, they feel like they've got to sign their kids up for every activity that comes along, and you're trying to keep up with your peer group who's doing the same thing with their kids. And it becomes a boundary issue. Are you saying yes to too many things? And so sometimes there are those people who honestly do just have too much. So a big part of stress reduction is, well, let me look at what's going on just for today. Is this too much? And you know what? It also goes back to a person's value system. One of the assessments that I love to give clients if it comes up is I've got this 2-page handout full of words. It takes a while, but clients have to pick their top 5 values.
Okay.
And so when I took the assessment a few years ago, I thought there's no way I'm going to have just 5.
Right.
But so I would narrow it down to say like 35. I'd put it aside. I'd come back to it. I'd narrow it down to 20. I'd keep whittling away with some time in between until I finally got down to my 5 core values. And this is a stress thing, because if you realize what is the most important, values to you, then you're going to do life from those top values. Anything else is too much.
I think that, and I love that. And in fact, I wouldn't mind having that sheet. And I think the key is obviously, like you said, whittle it down a little bit, take some time away from it for a few days and come back, because then you can get that clear head. And because sometimes I think some of those answers come with the mindset that you're in at that moment. And if you can have different moments. And I think the best way that I have to do that, and if you're somebody who has children and you're listening to this, I'm sure you would agree that I want to know how I look in my son's eyes. And, how my son would view me, because I view myself so much differently than I think other people do, good or bad. But I want to be like, if not to go on a bad, dark side here, but if I was on my deathbed, what would I want my son to remember me for? Is it the rungs of the ladder that I keep trying to achieve as an entrepreneur? Or is it a financial status? Is it how many cars are in the driveway? Or is it the conversations I've had with him about, life's lessons? So,
right.
I know it starts to sound a little corny when you get into that, but that kind of helped me narrow down the things that are most important in life to me, and kind of keeps me a little bit more grounded when I feel like I'm not.
Yes. Another thing to go along with that, Craig, is, as we're growing and learning and have goals, which is all a good thing, is to look at each day and say, what went well today? And the positivity research has actually, I don't know if she's still there, but Barbara Fredrickson, who used to be a researcher at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, was really a pioneer in the field of positivity. I love her book. And this is also a buffer against stress. But when we have days where we perceive that we've had a setback, and I use that word intentionally, all right? Because again, it's not just one day. We have to kind of think long term. Let's not view our successes and failures with what happens in a given day, given week, given month, even a given season, like what's going on with COVID. But one thing to boost, some good emotional health and relieve stress is to find gratitude in each day. And the magic ratio, which has been borne out scientifically, is greater than 3 to 1.
3 positives to 1 negative.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's not to be Pollyannish, so right now in this season of time, the one negative thing over here would be this COVID season, right? Sure. And how it doesn't matter what profession you're in, it's affected everybody's lives, regardless of age, regardless of career, all the way down to children who are still at home. Like, who has this not affected, right? But here's the thing, to stay in a good mental place, in a good mental state with that one thing going on, we have to start, and this is a great tool, start a gratitude journal. Okay, so life stinks for a lot of people right now. Okay, I'm not going to gloss over that. I'm not going to minimize that. But a good thing to do is to start getting in the habit of writing down in a journal at least 3 things that went well just that day. And what that does is it actually balances out our brain so we don't spiral down on that one negative thing. And it helps us to see options. What Dr. Fredrickson found in her scientific research was also that clinically depressed people had a positivity ratio of less than 1-to-1. They could not see anything going well. And so, again, she said the magic ratio in the clinical research, the clinical trials, is at least three things that have gone well, even though it's simple things. Hey, I could get up today. Hey, I had the physical ability to take care of that household project. Hey, I was able to get a good meal on the table tonight. Whatever it is, as simple as it is, it helps balance out those negative emotions and keeps you in proper perspective.
And that is difficult to do. It sounds so easy, but it's very difficult to do, especially right now.
Yes.
When you have an election year, when there's so much division going on, like there is every 4 years. You have the COVID thing and everything. Businesses closing down and people short on money, and unemployment's high. And it does seem like it's just the end of the world. And especially, with social media, and we're all surrounded by social media. Where every post is one of these other negative things being pushed down your throat. So I think that's a wonderful idea to just keep a journal and actually write them down, because if you're having that bad day, you can go back and look at all the good stuff that you've written down before and maybe helpfully bring you back into that mindset. I think that's a wonderful idea.
And, another thing, Craig, is looking at those things in your day that you absolutely do have control over. Right. That actually, so turning off the television set is actually a good thing. That's a boundary thing. You know what you're saying? You know what? This puts me in a bad emotional place. I'll speak for myself if I watch too much of it. So I turn it off. That's a boundary. Nope. I'm not letting that be part of my day or my evening or whatever. And so you start, so during this COVID season, I thought, well, what do I have control over? Well, I can control what I'm eating. I can control if I'm getting out in the neighborhood and walking on the days that are pretty to walk. I can start listening to podcasts. I can take care of some household projects that maybe I've gotten ignored. So you look at those things that you do have control over, and it actually gives you a sense of mastery, even just for the simple things. Because as we have found out, there's a lot that's not within our control anymore.
Right.
So, also just looking at, well, what are the simple things that I can choose for today that will give me a sense of mastery and a sense of confidence?
I like that. I like that a lot, because you're right. And I agree with so much with what you're saying, because I feel it. I actually go through it on a daily basis. And actually just this week, because a lot of people will tell you that, turn off the social media. Well, for those of us who have certain types of businesses, which, it depends on what you're in and what you do for a living, of course. But speaking for myself, a lot of my business between either the podcast or selling health insurance, I rely on social media to help my business survive and flourish. So I have to be on the social media sites fairly regularly. I can't just get rid of it. But I can regulate when I'm on it. And I just this week started not looking at social media before I go to bed. Part of my routine for my wife and I both was to, when we go to bed at night, we get on Facebook and kind of check out all the stuff that's been going on throughout the day. And so literally the last moments before I go to sleep at night, I'm looking at all those negative things that have happened all day long, right? All that stuff that's going by. And so I don't get on my phone when we go to bed. I put it down, I just plug it in, set it on the nightstand, and I start reading a book. And I'm not a book reader, but I would like to start becoming one, because it does take my mind off of the realism of the day and the stresses of the day and all those negative thoughts that surround us from moment to moment. Pulls me away from it a little bit. And you can read, fiction, nonfiction, doesn't really matter, but it's just something other than what's going on all day long. And I can't get out of the news. I'm somebody who likes to stay informed. So I won't just not watch the news, but as you mentioned, maybe just say, hey, I'll watch the 6 o'clock news from 6 to 6:30, and that's it. I don't want to watch it in the morning. I don't want to watch it at night, because they're all going to say the same thing anyway. So just watch it maybe a certain time of the day each day, so you can stay informed, but not be so inundated with all of that information.
Well, one thing that we did not previously discuss, and I don't want to go down a rabbit trail here, but I also do sleep coaching. And I team up with my husband, who's a professional. And so together we kind of do our part to get his patients into a healthy place for sleep. So stress can impact our sleep. So if you'd like, I can give just a couple of suggestions. That
Absolutely. Yeah. Throw them out there.
Well, so you want to look at the time, an hour and a half to 2 hours before you go to bed as sort of a decompress time. All right. So if you have trouble going to sleep, a lot of people who are stressed have trouble going to sleep. You want to look at some behaviors, some routines that will feed into a time of your body and your mind relaxing to prepare it for sleep. It could be a bath. It could be calm music. It could be what you're doing, reading a book. If you're worried about something, this has been borne out in neuroscience. If you're worried about something, keep a worry journal by your bed. It's not to problem solve, right? But your mind is obviously focused on some things that you're concerned about and stressed out about. So you just write out those things in a worry journal. You're not meant to problem solve. It's just to get that concept off your brain and release it so your brain can shut down to prepare itself for sleep.
Pulling it out of your head, putting it onto the paper.
Exactly. So, gratitude journals are great. Worry journals are great. And also don't do anything really that could be tense in the evening hours, like, a heavy family conversation. You don't want to do that within that 2-hour time frame of going to bed, because we do have a section in our brain, the amygdala, where when we get stressed and upset, that part of the brain lights up, and then our brain has a hard time decompressing for sleep. We're all just wired up. So, I always tell clients or sleep clients, great, have that conversation if it has to happen while the sun is up. Don't do it when the sun is down, because it will affect your sleep cycle.
Gotcha. That's good advice, because I too, like a lot of people, once I'm asleep, I'm generally okay, but falling asleep takes some time because the gears are turning. I'm thinking about the next day and what I need to get done. On occasion, that's a good thing for me. Sometimes this is my downtime to kind of work through some of those problems. It's quiet. I don't have all the distractions of the day, but sometimes it's just hard to be like, okay, I thought about it. Now I just want to turn it off. And it is difficult to turn off.
The key is to build resiliency. So come up with a top 10 list of things that put you in a happy place, good, healthy behaviors. They can be simple things, but you want to learn to default to those things whenever life hands you a stressor, be it small or big. And then that helps you bounce back from whatever it is that is creating the stress in your life.
How you handle it.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I just looked, and it is our time for this episode. It goes by so fast. If you would, I would love for people to contact you if they have questions. I know you have a couple books out. If you wouldn't mind, just tell them real quick about the books, where they can find them, and then, of course, how to contact you as well after the show.
So my most recent book is Identity Unveiled, Daughter of the King of Kings, which is a little bit of a memoir, life coaching book, counseling book, divided into 3 sections for people to consider their own life stories and how they may need to change the story. The other books have been out for a little while: Change Unveiled, Inspiration Unveiled, and Recipes Unveiled, all available on Amazon.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Also, do you have a website that folks can go to, or even an email address where they can contact you?
Sure. So I have a brand new website, which is my name, ShireneGentry.com, which is podcast driven. So I'd love to get some listeners to subscribe if they're looking for concepts about who they are and their identity. And yes, if you'd like to email me, my business email is hopeunveiled@gmail.com.
Thank you so much, Shirene. I appreciate you spending the time with me today. I
Thank
have
you,
a feeling
Craig.
we might have a few more conversations ahead.
I would love that.
I would love to record them as well because I actually got a lot personally from this conversation, and I'd like to talk to you more. And I think that a lot of other people might get a lot more from future episodes as well.
Oh,
so,
hey, let's do it. I'm all about, just like you said, one person. If you can help one person, then it's worth it.
Absolutely. Everybody else, thank you so much. This has been the Biz Reveal with Shirene Gentry today. You can find us at thebizreveal.com at our website. If you listen to podcasts as opposed to watching them, you can find us on all the podcast apps. Just choose your favorite one and we'll be there. Otherwise, you can see the video versions of all of our podcasts on YouTube and just look up the Biz Reveal there. Thank you, everybody. Till next time.